It all began on a Monday evening, the kind of night where routine clings to you like a second skin. I came home from work, shoulders heavy with the weight of another day. The house was quiet, too quiet. Usually, by this time, Hannah would be in the kitchen, her music blaring as she pretended to be on Top Chef. But tonight, the silence felt like it was holding its breath. I walked in to find her seated at the dining table, legs crossed, scrolling through her phone. She didn't even look up. The glow of the screen painted her face in sharp lines, and for the first time, I noticed something different. An air about her that I couldn't place. Cold, distant, not like the woman I married. "Hey," I said, hanging my coat by the door. "Everything okay?" Her eyes flicked up for half a second before returning to her phone. "Yeah, just tired," she muttered. "Tired. Lately, everything boiled down to tired. Too tired to talk, too tired to go out, too tired to exist together." The word felt like a wall she'd built between us. But tonight it felt different, more calculated, like she was holding something back. I walked over and dropped my keys on the table, deliberately breaking the silence. "How was your day?" "Busy," she replied curtly, still not looking at me. Her tone was clipped, but her hands betrayed her. She kept adjusting her grip on the phone, her fingers fidgeting as if she didn't know what to do with them. "What's got you so glued to that thing?" I asked, my voice light, teasing. She laughed, a quick, hollow sound. "Just a stupid meme from Sarah," she said, holding up the phone for me to see. A picture of a cat in sunglasses. It was funny enough, but something about her timing felt rehearsed. That's when I noticed it. Her smartwatch. It was buzzing, repeatedly. Her reflex was immediate. She turned her wrist away, muting the notifications with a practiced swipe. My stomach twisted. I didn't say anything, but in that moment, it felt like a crack appeared in the foundation of our home. I made an excuse about needing to shower and headed upstairs. As the water pounded against my skin, my mind raced. This wasn't just tired. This wasn't just stress. I'd been noticing the shifts for weeks now, her sudden need for privacy, her nights out with friends I'd never met, the lingering scent of cologne that didn't belong to me. When I came back downstairs, she was gone. The phone charger was missing from its usual spot, and the front door was ajar. I walked out onto the porch and spotted her standing by her car, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was low, urgent, and though I couldn't make out the words, the tone was unmistakable. She was speaking to someone she didn't want me to know about. I leaned against the doorway, watching her through the shadows. When she hung up, she turned and jumped, startled to see me. "Who was that?" I asked casually, folding my arms. "Work call," she said too quickly, her voice tight. "Just some last-minute stuff from the office." "Work calls you at 9 at night now?" I tilted my head, studying her. She hesitated, her hand tightening around the phone. "Yeah, it's a big project. Look, I'm exhausted. I'm just gonna go to bed." And with that, she brushed past me. Her footsteps hurried and her eyes avoiding mine. But the thing about cracks? Once they appear, they only grow deeper. That night, as she slept with her back turned to me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail in my head. The phone calls, the distant glances, the way she flinched when I touched her shoulder earlier that week. I decided then and there, I wasn't going to let this slide. Whatever secrets Hannah was hiding, I was going to uncover them. And I had a feeling the truth would be uglier than I wanted to admit. The next day started like any other, but my mind was anything but settled. Hannah moved around the kitchen that morning with mechanical efficiency, sipping her coffee while scrolling her phone as if the tense moment on the porch the night before had never happened. I played along, my voice calm, my smile easy, but inside, I was watching her every move. "Got a lot planned today?" I asked as she slid her mug into the sink. "Just the usual," she replied over her shoulder. "Gym, errands, maybe lunch with Sarah." Sarah, again, her ever-convenient alibi. But something about the way she said it, the practiced casualness, felt like she was testing me, daring me to poke holes in her story. "Sounds good," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Tell Sarah I said hi." Her head jerked slightly at that, but she recovered quickly. "Sure," she said before grabbing her keys. "Don't wait up for dinner." I'll probably be out late. The door clicked shut behind her, and I felt a surge of adrenaline rush through me. This was it. Today I was going to find answers. By the time I got to the gym she claimed to go to, I'd worked up a knot in my stomach that I couldn't ignore. Her car was parked in its usual spot, but when I stepped inside, the front desk attendant greeted me with a confused look. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm looking for my wife," I said, keeping my voice steady. "She's here all the time. Hannah? Brunette? About this tall?" The woman shook her head, her ponytail swaying. "I haven't seen her today. Are you sure she checked in?" My pulse quickened. "Positive. Her car's in the lot." The attendant glanced toward the parking lot, her brow furrowed. "We've been pretty quiet this morning. Maybe she's upstairs." I thanked her and climbed the stairs to the cardio section, my eyes scanning every machine. Nothing. She wasn't here. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, waiting, watching. Finally, she appeared. But she wasn't alone. A man followed her out of the gym. Tall, athletic, dressed like someone who spends more time flexing in front of mirrors than doing actual workouts. His hand brushed her arm as they talked, and she laughed. Not the polite laugh she gave me lately, but something else, something real. I grabbed my phone, snapping a quick photo. She didn't go back to the car. Instead, they walked to his and she got in. My chest tightened as I watched them drive off. They stopped at a little cafe on the other side of town. One I didn't even know she knew about. I parked a safe distance away, heart pounding, watching through the windshield as they took a corner booth. They sat too close, their heads bent together, his hand casually resting on her knee. I didn't know what hurt more, the blatant intimacy or the ease with which she'd lied to my face. I stayed rooted in my seat, gripping the steering wheel, until they left. He drove her back to the gym, and she slid out of the car, brushing her hair back and smoothing her skirt like nothing had happened. That evening, as I sat waiting for her to come home, I noticed the lipstick stain. It wasn't hers. She never wore red. It was smeared faintly on the collar of the shirt she tossed into the laundry basket. When she finally walked through the door, I was sitting at the dining table, the shirt lying neatly in front of me. She froze when she saw it, her keys slipping from her hand. "Busy day at the gym?" I asked, my voice ice cold. Her face paled, but she recovered quickly. "What's this?" she asked, trying to sound confused. I stood, crossing the room slowly. "I'd like you to tell me, Hannah, because I don't think you got this from lunch with Sarah." She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. That was the first time I saw it. True fear flickering behind her eyes. Hannah's hand trembled as she snatched the shirt from the table, her eyes darting between me and the damning lipstick smear. Her face, always so composed, cracked for a moment. But then, like a switch flipping, she forced a laugh. "This?" she said, holding the shirt up. "You've got to be kidding me. It's probably from when I hugged Sarah earlier." "Sarah wears red lipstick?" I asked, my voice steady but my jaw tight. She sometimes does," she stammered. Her hands twisted the fabric of the shirt, her movements agitated. "Honestly, you're being ridiculous. You're acting like you're lying to my face?" I interrupted, stepping closer. "Because you are, Hannah." Her defenses shot up immediately. "Oh, so now I'm a liar? Just because of a little stain? God, listen to yourself. Do you even hear how crazy you sound?" Crazy. That word hung in the air like smoke. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to breathe. "Don't," I said quietly, my voice low but firm. "Don't try to flip this on me. I know you weren't at the gym today. I know you left with someone else. I saw you." Her eyes widened for a split second, a flicker of panic before the mask fell back into place. "You what? Are you following me now?" "I didn't have to follow you," I said, keeping my tone calm, measured. "You made it pretty easy. Bryce's car is hard to miss." Her face went pale, and for the first time she didn't have a comeback. That name had landed like a punch. "So," I continued, crossing my arms, "are you going to tell me what's really going on? Or should I keep going?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. Instead, she dropped the shirt and turned away, pacing the length of the room like a caged animal. Finally, she spun around, her eyes blazing. "Fine," she snapped. "Yes, I was with Bryce. But it's not what you think. We're just friends. He's been going through a rough time, and I've been helping him out. Helping him out? I repeated, my voice sharp. You mean like the way he was helping you in that cafe? Because from where I was sitting, it looked a hell of a lot more like you were on a date. Her jaw clenched, and she looked away, refusing to meet my eyes. You have no idea what you're talking about, she muttered. Then enlighten me, I said, stepping closer. Explain the gym, the cafe, the lipstick. Hell, explain why you've been treating me like a stranger in my own home. She flinched at that, but instead of answering, she crossed her arms and glared at me. Maybe if you weren't so boring, I wouldn't need someone else to talk to. The words hit like a slap. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Boring? I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. That's your excuse? For sneaking around behind my back? Her lips curled into a cruel smirk. Oh, don't be so dramatic. You don't even know what you saw. You're just assuming the worst because you're insecure. Insecure? I snapped, my voice rising. Do you even hear yourself, Hannah? This isn't about me. This is about you. You lied to me. You've been lying for God knows how long. And now, instead of owning up to it, you're trying to make me the bad guy. Because you're acting like one, she shouted back. You're spying on me, following me around. How do you think that makes me feel? How you feel? I said, incredulous. You're the one cheating on me, Hannah. Her face hardened, and for a moment, the room was so silent I could hear my own heartbeat. Then she laughed. Cold, bitter, and full of venom. Cheating? She said, shaking her head. You don't know the first thing about cheating. If I wanted to cheat, trust me, you wouldn't even know about it. The words sent a chill down my spine. She was challenging me, daring me to push further. Then prove me wrong, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Let me see your phone. Show me the messages, the calls, whatever you've been hiding. Her expression shifted, panic flashing in her eyes before she quickly masked it with defiance. You don't get to demand that, she said, clutching her phone like a lifeline. You don't trust me? Fine. But I don't owe you proof of anything. Yes, you do, I said, stepping closer. If you want me to believe you, then prove you're telling the truth. Otherwise, I'm done. Her hands shook as she held the phone. Her lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, I thought she might actually hand it over. But then, she did something that made my blood run cold. She turned, opened the back door, and hurled the phone into the darkness. The crash of it hitting the pavement was deafening. There, she said, her voice shaking with fury. Now you can't go digging through my life anymore. I stared at her, stunned. She stood there, breathing heavily, her face a mix of defiance and something else, fear. That was the moment I knew. There was no salvaging this. Whatever love we'd had was gone, shattered into pieces as irreparable as the phone lying broken outside. The crash of the phone hitting the pavement outside echoed in my mind as I stood frozen, watching her. Hannah stood in the doorway, chest heaving, her face defiant but trembling. The tension in the air was suffocating. For a moment, neither of us said a word, as though we were waiting to see who would break first. You just threw away your phone? I said slowly, my voice eerily calm. Who does that unless they have something to hide? Her eyes narrowed, but I saw the crack in her armor. I'm done with this conversation, she said, turning her back on me and walking into the kitchen. You're acting insane. No, I snapped, following her. You're done lying. I want the truth, Hannah. Right now. She opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and twisted the cap off with shaking hands. What truth? She hissed. You're making up stories in your head, and now you want me to confess to things I haven't even done? I'm not playing this game, Liam. Oh, it's not a game anymore, I said, stepping closer. I saw you with Bryce. I saw how close you two were. You think I don't know what's been going on? You're insulting my intelligence. She slammed the water bottle down on the counter, water sloshing over the sides. And you're insulting me, she shouted. You're accusing me of something you can't even prove, and for what? Because I've been distant? Because I've had to pick up the slack while you sit there, acting like a martyr every time something doesn't go your way. My blood boiled at her deflection. But before I could respond, she let out a bitter laugh and muttered, almost under her breath, "You think Bryce is the problem? You have no idea." The words stopped me cold. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard her right. "What did you just say?" She froze, her eyes wide for a split second before she recovered, shaking her head. "Nothing," she said quickly, but her voice betrayed her. "No, not nothing," I said, stepping closer. "What do you mean? I have no idea? What else is going on, Hannah? Who else is there?" "I didn't mean it like that," she stammered, her confidence unraveling before my eyes. "You're twisting my words. You just admitted there's more to this," I said, my voice rising. "So tell me, Hannah, if it's not Bryce, who is it? How many other lies have you been feeding me?" Her face twisted into a mask of fury, but I saw the fear beneath it. "You're paranoid," she spat. "You're reading into things that aren't there. God, no wonder I—" She stopped herself, biting her lip, but it was too late. "No wonder you what?" I demanded, my voice like a whip. "Say it, Hannah. Go on." Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, she looked cornered, her bravado slipping. "You're impossible to talk to," she said, dodging the question. "You're always looking for something to fight about. I can't take it anymore. Don't you dare try to make this my fault," I said, slamming my hand on the counter. "I've been trying, Hannah. I've been here working on this marriage while you've been sneaking around behind my back. So, tell me, what is it you can't take anymore?" "Being caught." She glared at me, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. "Maybe I can't take pretending everything's okay when it's not. Maybe I can't take the way you're suffocating me with your questions and your expectations." "Suffocating you?" I asked, my voice breaking with disbelief. "I've given you everything, Hannah. Everything. And this is how you repay me? By running off with Bryce? Or whoever else you've been seeing?" Her silence spoke volumes. "Unbelievable," I said, running a hand through my hair. "You know what? Keep lying, Hannah. Keep spinning your stories. But one way or another, I'm going to find out the truth." I turned to leave, my mind racing with anger and betrayal. But as I reached the door, her voice stopped me cold. "Liam," she said, her tone low, almost resigned. "If you keep digging, you're not going to like what you find." I turned back to her, my fists clenched. "The truth can't hurt me more than you already have," I said, before walking out the door and slamming it behind me. I needed air, clarity. Anything to keep me from going back into that house and tearing apart every lie she'd ever told me. I got into my car and drove aimlessly, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly they hurt. Her words replayed in my head like a broken record. "You're not going to like what you find." She wasn't just warning me. She was daring me, and I'd be damned if I let her get away with it that I didn't go back home that night. Instead, I drove to a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town, one of those places with flickering neon signs and cracked leather booths. I ordered a coffee I didn't touch and sat there staring at my phone, scrolling through memories, photos, old texts, anniversary posts on social media. I kept searching for a moment, a clue, where I might have missed the shift. But all I could feel was anger, not just at Hannah, but at myself, for trusting her, for believing that every late-night gym session, every extra work meeting, every little excuse was innocent. She thought she'd broken me, with her lies, her deflections, her cryptic little threats. But she was wrong. If anything, she'd lit a fire in me. This wasn't just about catching her anymore. This was about taking control. The next morning, I made my first move. I called in sick to work and headed to a friend of mine, Kevin, a guy I'd known since college. Kevin was a tech wizard, the type who could recover files from a dead laptop or hack into a secure server if you gave him enough coffee and time. I walked into his cluttered office, where wires and motherboards covered every available surface. Kevin glanced up from his desk, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Liam," he said, surprised. "What brings you here? You're not usually the spy thriller type." I dropped Hannah's phone, the one she'd thrown, onto his desk. The screen was shattered, but the device itself seemed intact. "I need you to get everything you can off this," I said. Kevin raised an eyebrow. "Ex-girlfriend drama or wife?" I interrupted. "And let's just say there's more at stake than a breakup playlist." He let out a low whistle. All right, man. I'll see what I can do. While Kevin worked his magic, I decided to test a different lead. Bryce. If he was the guy I saw her with, he'd know something. And if Hannah wasn't going to talk, maybe he would. Bryce's office wasn't hard to find. It was listed on the company's website. I parked across the street and waited, watching as employees filtered in and out of the glass doors. When I finally spotted him, I almost laughed at how predictable he looked. Tall, broad shoulders, perfectly styled hair, and an expensive suit. The kind of guy who probably had an Instagram account full of gym selfies and motivational quotes. I followed him to a nearby coffee shop, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't have a plan, just anger and adrenaline driving me forward. He was standing at the counter when I walked up behind him. Bryce, right? I asked. He turned, blinking in confusion. Yeah. Do I know you? You don't? I said, crossing my arms. But you know my wife, Hannah. His face changed immediately, eyes widening, lips parting as if to speak but finding no words. That was all the confirmation I needed. You look surprised, I said, my voice cold. Guess she didn't mention me. Look, man, I don't know what you think, he started, but I cut him off. Save it, I snapped. I saw you two yesterday, at the cafe, so don't stand here and insult me with denials. I want to know exactly what's going on. Bryce glanced around, clearly uncomfortable. I don't know what you think you saw, but it's not what you're imagining. Hannah and I. You and Hannah, I interrupted, stepping closer. Let me guess. She told you I was controlling, that she was miserable, that I didn't understand her. Is that it? Did she tell you you're special? That you're the only one who gets her? His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. You're not the first, I said, my voice steady now, low and dangerous. And I have a feeling you won't be the last. So why don't you cut the act and tell me the truth? Are you sleeping with her? No, he said quickly, too quickly. He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. Look, we've been hanging out, but it's not like that. She needed someone to talk to. She said things at home weren't great, and I was just trying to be a friend. A friend? I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Is that why you had your hand on her leg yesterday? That's some friendship you've got there, Bryce. He went pale, stammering. I didn't mean to. Look, I didn't know it was this serious. She never said. You didn't know she was married? I finished for him, my anger bubbling over. Or you didn't care? Before he could answer, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Kevin. Got something. Call me. I turned back to Bryce, leaning in so close I could see the sweat forming on his brow. This isn't over, I said quietly. Stay away from my wife. Back at Kevin's office, I found him grinning like a kid on Christmas. You're not going to believe this, he said, spinning his chair around to face me. What did you find? I asked, sitting down. He handed me a folder of printouts. Texts, emails, call logs. It's all here. Your wife's been busy. And not just with Bryce. My stomach dropped as I flipped through the pages. There were messages from Bryce, sure, but there were others too. Names I didn't recognize. Conversations that were flirtatious, suggestive, and worse. She's been juggling at least 3 guys, Kevin said, his tone grim. Maybe more. And if you look at the timestamps, some of these overlap with times she told you she was at the gym or out with friends. I felt like the ground was falling out from under me. Every suspicion, every gut feeling. It was all worse than I'd imagined. What do you want to do now? Kevin asked cautiously. I stared at the folder, my hands trembling with rage. I'm going to confront her, I said, my voice hollow. And this time, she's not walking away. When I pulled into the driveway that evening, the house looked deceptively normal. Warm lights spilled from the windows, and I could see Hannah moving around the living room, tidying up as if her world wasn't about to collapse. I sat in the car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Kevin's folder sat on the passenger seat, the evidence inside like a loaded gun. My mind raced with everything I'd seen. Hannah's flirtations, the overlapping timelines, and the casual way she'd torn apart our life without a second thought. But this wasn't going to be like the last time. I wasn't walking into this blind. This time I had the upper hand. I grabbed the folder, took a deep breath, and stepped out of the car. When I opened the door, Hannah looked up from the couch, startled. She was dressed casually in sweats and a tank top, her hair tied back in a messy bun. It was the picture of domestic normalcy, and for a second I almost believed it. Almost. "You're home early," she said, her voice too cheerful. "Yeah," I replied, setting the folder down on the kitchen counter. "We need to talk." Her smile faltered. "What's wrong?" I motioned to the folder. "Why don't you sit down? You're going to want to be comfortable for this." She hesitated, her eyes darting to the folder. "Liam, what's going on? You're acting weird." "I'm acting weird?" I said, my voice tight with controlled anger. "Hannah, I've been giving you the benefit of the doubt for weeks, months. I've ignored every red flag, every gut feeling. But now," I tapped the folder, "now I've got the truth. So why don't we stop playing games and cut to the chase?" Her face hardened, and she crossed her arms. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't," I said, flipping the folder open and pulling out the first page. "Let me jog your memory. Do you recognize this text? 'You're the only one who makes me feel alive.' Because that's not exactly something you say to your friend from work." Her eyes widened, and for a split second, she looked genuinely shocked. But then she recovered, rolling her eyes. "Are you seriously digging through my messages now? That's such an invasion of privacy, Liam." "Privacy?" I barked a laugh, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You've been sneaking around with Bryce and half the male population, and you want to talk about privacy? Half the male population?" she snapped, her voice rising. "Oh, give me a break. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Bryce is just a friend, and if you can't handle me having friends, maybe you're the problem, not me." I slammed the folder shut, the sound echoing through the room. Don't you dare try to turn this on me again. You think I don't know what's been going on? I've got everything, Hannah. Every text, every call, every time you told me you were at the gym or out with Sarah and were actually with someone else. I know." She stared at me, her expression blank, her mouth slightly open as if searching for the right words. But instead of denying it, she did something I didn't expect. She laughed. Not a nervous chuckle, not a laugh of disbelief. A cold, bitter laugh that sent chills down my spine. "You think you know everything?" she said, shaking her head. "You don't have a clue, Liam." "Oh, I think I've got a pretty clear picture," I shot back. "Why don't you enlighten me if I'm so clueless?" She stepped closer, her arms uncrossing as her demeanor shifted. "Fine. You want the truth? You're right. I've been seeing Bryce, and maybe a few others. But can you honestly blame me?" My jaw tightened, but I said nothing. "Do you know what it's like to feel invisible in your own marriage?" she continued, her voice rising. "To come home every day to someone who treats you like a roommate instead of a wife? You stopped caring, Liam. You stopped trying. So yeah, I found people who made me feel wanted, who actually paid attention to me. And you know what? It felt good." Her words were like daggers, but I refused to let her see how deep they cut. "So this is my fault now?" I asked, my voice low. "If the shoe fits," she said, shrugging. I took a step back, shaking my head in disbelief. "You're unbelievable. I've been working my ass off to provide for us, to build a life for us, and this is how you repay me? By playing victim and acting like you had no choice but to cheat." "I didn't choose to cheat," she snapped. "You pushed me to it. Maybe if you'd paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have needed someone else to fill the void." "Needed someone else?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You're not a victim here, Hannah. You made a choice. Over and over again, you chose to lie to me, to betray me, to destroy our marriage. Don't stand there and act like this is something I did to you." Her face twisted in anger, but before she could respond, I grabbed the folder and pulled out the last piece of evidence. A photo of her and Bryce from the cafe, his hand on her leg, her smile wide and unguarded. "This," I said, slamming the photo onto the table. "This is what you threw us away for. Was it worth it, Hannah?" She stared at the photo, her expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of regret in her eyes. But then she lifted her chin, her voice cold. "I guess that depends," she said. "Was I ever worth it to you?" Her words hung in the air, sharp and cruel. And in that moment, I realized something. The woman standing in front of me wasn't the woman I'd fallen in love with. That woman was gone, replaced by someone I didn't even recognize. Without another word, I turned and walked out the door, leaving the photo, the folder, and the ruins of our marriage behind me. I drove aimlessly for hours, the weight of her words crushing me. Was I ever worth it to you? The audacity, the sheer, venomous audacity of someone who'd burned down everything we'd built together and still managed to cast herself as the victim. Eventually, I pulled over in a deserted parking lot, the engine humming as I sat in silence. My phone buzzed on the seat beside me, but I ignored it. I couldn't deal with anyone right now. Not Kevin. Not my coworkers. Not even myself. Then it buzzed again. And again. Finally, I glanced down and saw a name I hadn't expected. Hannah. For a moment, I considered letting it ring out. Whatever excuse or insult she was about to hurl my way could wait. But then something about the sheer persistence of the calls made me pick up. What? I answered coldly, not bothering to mask my anger. Liam. Her voice was frantic, almost unrecognizable. I'm at the hospital. I sat up straighter, my pulse quickening. What happened? She hesitated, her voice cracking. I need you to come, please. What's going on, Hannah? I demanded, my anger still simmering but now tinged with confusion. I'll explain when you get here, she said quickly. Just please, Liam. I need you. For a second, I thought about refusing, about hanging up and letting her deal with whatever mess she'd gotten herself into. But despite everything, I couldn't shake the years of instinct to protect her, to be there when she needed me. Which hospital? I asked, my voice hard. When I arrived, the fluorescent lights of the ER buzzed faintly overhead. The waiting room was crowded with tired faces and the faint smell of antiseptic. A nurse directed me to room 14, and as I approached, I felt a surge of unease. Hannah was sitting on the hospital bed, her face pale, a small bandage on her temple. Her hair was disheveled, and her clothes were wrinkled, as if she'd been through a storm. When she saw me, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Fear. What happened? I asked, stepping into the room but keeping my distance. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, as if struggling to find the right words. I made a mistake, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall. That much is obvious. Care to elaborate? Her eyes flicked to the nurse standing nearby, and she hesitated. The nurse must have picked up on the tension because she stepped out, giving us a brief moment of privacy. I went out, Hannah began, her voice trembling. With Bryce. Of course, I thought bitterly, but I didn't interrupt. We were at this bar, she continued, and there were these two guys. I didn't know them. They were just there. We started talking, drinking. My stomach sank, but I stayed silent, letting her dig her grave. Bryce got into an argument with one of them, she said, her words tumbling out faster now. It got heated, and then the other guy, he grabbed me, Liam. He wouldn't let go. I clenched my fists, the anger surging back. What do you mean, he grabbed you? He tried to take me outside, she said, her voice breaking. Bryce tried to stop him, but they hit him, and then I fell. I hit my head. Her hand went to the bandage on her temple, and for the first time, I noticed the faint bruising around her wrist. And where's Bryce now? I asked, my tone icy. Her eyes darted away. He left, she said quietly. He ran. Of course he did. The so-called friend she'd risked everything for hadn't even stayed to help her when things got bad. So let me get this straight, I said, stepping closer. You went out with Bryce, drank with strangers, got into a fight, and now you're in the hospital. And you called me, the husband you've been lying to and cheating on, to bail you out. Her lip quivered, and tears filled her eyes. I didn't know who else to call, Liam. I was scared. I shook my head, disbelief washing over me. You're unbelievable, Hannah. You threw everything away for this guy, for this life. And now, when it all falls apart, you expect me to come running. Her tears spilled over, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not this time. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she said, her voice cracking. I made mistakes, Liam, but I don't want to lose you. I let out a bitter laugh. You don't want to lose me? Hannah, you lost me the moment you decided I wasn't enough for you. The moment you decided lying and sneaking around was easier than being honest. You don't get to play the victim now. Her sobs grew louder, and she buried her face in her hands. For a moment, I just stood there, watching her, torn between the years of love we'd shared and the mountain of betrayal she'd built. Finally, I took a deep breath and stepped back toward the door. I'll tell the nurse you're ready to go, I said quietly. Liam, please, she begged, reaching for me, but I didn't turn around. I'm done, Hannah, I said, my voice steady. You're on your own now. And with that, I walked out, leaving her in that sterile room, just as she'd left me in the wreckage of our life. The drive home was a blur. I barely registered the world outside. The streetlights, the faint glow of other cars, the hum of the engine. All I could see was Hannah's tear-streaked face and hear her desperate voice begging me to stay. But I didn't feel pity. Not anymore. What I felt was exhaustion, as if every ounce of energy and love I'd ever poured into her had been siphoned away. When I got home, the silence hit me like a wall. The house was eerily still, every creak of the floorboards amplified in the emptiness. I dropped my keys on the counter, stared at the photos on the wall. Our wedding day, vacations, holidays with her family, and felt nothing. Those memories weren't mine anymore. They belonged to a different version of me, a man who still believed in her. The next morning, I called a lawyer. The receptionist transferred me to a divorce attorney who sounded calm, professional, detached. Everything I needed in that moment. I didn't want empathy. I wanted action. How soon can we get this started? I asked after explaining the situation in clipped, matter-of-fact sentences. We'll need to gather some financial records, determine property division, and, if it's contentious, prepare for mediation, the attorney said. But first, have you discussed this with your wife? She knows it's over, I said, my voice flat. Good, he replied. The sooner we establish clear communication, the smoother this will go. I'll email you a list of documents to start collecting. As I hung up, I felt the first flicker of relief, like a crack of sunlight breaking through storm clouds. For the first time, I wasn't drowning in her lies. I was taking control. By mid-afternoon, the storm arrived. My phone lit up with calls and messages from Hannah, but I ignored them all. When that didn't work, she started calling from unknown numbers. Finally, when I couldn't take the buzzing anymore, I picked up. Stop calling me, I said coldly. Liam, please, she said, her voice frantic. We need to talk. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. I'll go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes. There's nothing to fix, Hannah, I replied, my tone sharp. You didn't mess up. You made a choice over and over again. And now you're dealing with the consequences. You don't understand, she cried. I wasn't myself. I was just lost. But I still love you. Doesn't that count for something? I let out a bitter laugh. Love? You don't destroy someone you love, Hannah. You don't lie to them, betray them, humiliate them. Whatever it is you feel for me, it's not love. She was silent for a moment, and then her voice dropped, her tone shifting. Fine. If you won't talk to me, I'll make sure you regret it. You think you're the only one who can play hardball? I've got dirt on you too, Liam. Dirt? I asked, incredulous. What dirt? That I trusted you? That I tried to build a life with you while you ran around with Bryce and who knows how many others? Go ahead, Hannah. Tell the world. I've got nothing to hide. Her silence was deafening. You're out of moves, Hannah, I said quietly. This game's over. Accept it. I hung up before she could respond, blocking her number for good measure. That night, Kevin called. Got more for you, he said, his voice hesitant. More? I asked, dreading the answer. Yeah, he said, sighing. I looked deeper into her call logs and messages. There's another guy, well, two more, actually. One's local, but the other? He's out of state. They've been planning trips together. Some of the messages are explicit. I closed my eyes, the familiar wave of anger rising again. But this time, it was muted, like a fire burning low. Send it to the lawyer, I said. You sure? Kevin asked. This stuff is ugly, man. You don't have to see it if you don't want to. I don't need to see it, I said firmly. I just need it on record. By the weekend, the pieces were falling into place. I'd met with the lawyer, handed over the evidence, and started looking for apartments. The house, with its echoes of her betrayal, was no longer a home. As I packed my things, I found an old shoebox in the back of the closet. Inside were letters Hannah had written me back when we were dating, sweet, handwritten notes filled with promises of forever. I held one up, reading the words through a haze of disbelief. You're the love of my life. I can't wait to spend every day making you as happy as you make me. It felt like a cruel joke now, a relic from a world that no longer existed. I tore the letters in half, one by one, until the shoebox was empty. On Sunday, I got a call from her mother. Liam, she began, her voice gentle. Hannah's been crying all weekend. She told me what happened, well, her version of it, anyway. I wanted to hear your side. I hesitated, unsure of how much to say. She cheated on me, I said finally. With multiple people. I've got the proof. There's no coming back from this. Her mother sighed, a deep, weary sound. I'm so sorry, Liam. I don't know what's gotten into her. She wasn't raised like this. Does it matter? I asked, my voice heavy. She made her choices. Now she gets to live with them. There was a long silence before her mother spoke again. I want you to know, you'll always be family to us, no matter what happens. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you, I said, my voice tight. As I hung up, I felt a strange mix of sadness and resolve. Hannah might have shattered our life, but she wasn't going to shatter me. I wasn't the man she could manipulate anymore. I was done. And this time, I was walking away for good. By Monday morning, the pieces of my old life were almost completely dismantled. The lawyer had already filed the divorce papers. The evidence against Hannah was airtight, and I'd signed a lease on a small apartment across town. The house, our house, felt like a husk, stripped of meaning. Every picture frame, every piece of furniture, even the scent of her perfume lingering in the air. It all felt suffocating. I wanted out. I spent the day packing the last of my things, carefully separating what was mine from what would stay behind. As I boxed up books, clothes, and a few sentimental items, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Kevin, and the subject line stopped me cold. You need to see this. The message contained a single video file. No context, no explanation, just the file. With a deep breath, I opened it. The video was shaky, like it had been recorded on a phone, and the lighting was dim. But I recognized the setting immediately, a bar. The same bar where Hannah had gotten into the altercation that landed her in the hospital. In the video, Hannah was laughing, her head tilted back, her hand resting on the arm of one of the men sitting beside her. Bryce was nowhere to be seen. Her voice carried over the noise, loud enough for the phone's microphone to pick up. I don't care what he thinks anymore, she said, slurring slightly. Liam's such a boring control freak. Always wants everything his way. He's not even fun anymore. Honestly, I should have left him years ago. The man sitting next to her grinned, leaning closer. Why didn't you? She shrugged, swirling her drink. Because he pays the bills. He's predictable, safe. But God, he's so clueless. My stomach turned as the man laughed, his hand brushing her thigh. You deserve better, he said, his tone dripping with sleaze. Hannah tilted her head coyly. Maybe I do. The video ended abruptly, but the damage was done. I sat there, staring at the screen, my heart pounding with a mix of fury and humiliation. All those years of love, all the sacrifices I'd made to support her, to build a life together, it was nothing to her. I was nothing to her. I didn't wait. I called Hannah. She picked up on the second ring, her voice cautious. Liam, we need to talk, I said, my tone cold and unyielding. I'm coming over. She hesitated. I don't think that's a good. I'm not asking, I snapped, and hung up before she could argue. When I arrived, she was waiting in the living room, her arms crossed defensively. She'd clearly tried to clean herself up. Her hair was styled, and she was wearing makeup, but her eyes were puffy, and she looked uneasy. "What's this about?" she asked as I stepped inside. I didn't bother sitting down. I pulled out my phone, opened the video, and set it on the coffee table. "Play it," I said, my voice cold. Her eyes flicked to the screen, then back to me. "What is this?" "Play it," I repeated, my jaw tight. She picked up the phone reluctantly, and as the video started, her face paled. The confident, defiant woman who had laughed off every accusation, who had twisted every confrontation to her advantage, crumbled before my eyes. When the video ended, she set the phone down, her hands shaking. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "It doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is that this is who you really are, Hannah. A liar, a user, someone who takes and never gives anything back." She shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "Liam, I was drunk. I didn't mean any of that. You know I love you. Don't—" I cut her off, my voice sharp. "Don't you dare say you love me. Not after this. You used me, Hannah. You kept me around because I was safe, because I made your life easy. And the second I wasn't exciting enough for you, you went looking for someone else. Or rather, multiple someone else's." Her tears spilled over, and she reached for me, but I stepped back. "Liam, please. I'll do anything. We can fix this." "You don't fix something that's already been destroyed," I said, my voice steady but heavy with finality. "You don't fix what you've stomped into the ground." She sank onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. Her sobs filled the room, but I felt nothing. No pity, no sadness, only a strange, hollow sense of relief. "I've already filed for divorce," I said, standing tall. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer. I'll be moving out tomorrow, and after that, I never want to see or hear from you again." "Liam," she choked out, her voice breaking. "Don't do this. I'll change. Too late," I said firmly. I turned and walked out the door, the weight of the past finally lifting as I left her behind. That night, I stood in my new, empty apartment, staring out the window at the city lights. The future was uncertain, and I knew there'd be tough days ahead. But for the first time in years, I felt free. Hannah's lies had burned down our life, but from the ashes, I was ready to rebuild. This time, on my terms. I didn't think it could get any worse after that video. I didn't think Hannah could sink lower. But life has a cruel way of proving you wrong, especially when someone like her is involved. The day after I walked out, I got a call from my lawyer. "We've received a response from your wife's attorney," he said, his tone cautious. "You should know. She's contesting the divorce terms. She's asking for alimony and wants to keep the house." I almost dropped the phone. "Alimony? The house?" I barked. "She's the one who cheated. She's the one who lied. And now she wants me to bankroll her life." "I know it feels unfair," the lawyer said carefully, "but she's citing emotional distress and claims she's unable to support herself due to the breakdown of the marriage." I let out a bitter laugh. The breakdown of the marriage? She broke it down when she decided to hop from guy to guy like it was a goddamn sport. "I understand your frustration," he said, "but it's important we approach this strategically. With the evidence we have, we can push back hard. She's in no position to win this." I hung up, seething. Hannah wasn't just trying to play the victim. She was trying to profit from it. It wasn't enough that she'd shattered my trust, humiliated me, and turned our marriage into a farce. Now she wanted to take everything I'd worked for. If it was a war she wanted, it was a war she'd get. A week later, my lawyer and I met to review our strategy. The evidence we'd gathered, texts, call logs, photos, the video, was rock solid. But then Kevin dropped a bombshell that took things to another level. "Remember the guy Hannah got into that fight with at the bar?" Kevin said over the phone. "Turns out he pressed charges against her." "What?" I asked, stunned. "Yeah." I dug a little deeper. "Apparently, after you left her at the hospital, she had a run-in with the police. The guy claimed she attacked him first. There's a report and everything." "Of course there is," I muttered, rubbing my temples. "This could work in your favor," Kevin added. "It paints a pretty clear picture of her character. If your lawyer uses this, it's game over." I relayed the information to my lawyer, who grinned like a shark. "This is gold," he said. "She's trying to paint herself as the victim, but with this, it won't hold water in court." The court date was set for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, I kept my distance from Hannah. The only communication we had was through lawyers. She sent messages through her attorney, full of empty apologies and pleas for reconciliation, but I saw them for what they were: desperate attempts to claw back control. On the day of the hearing, I walked into the courtroom with my lawyer by my side and Kevin's evidence in hand. Hannah was already there, sitting at the plaintiff's table with her lawyer. She looked polished and put together, but there was a nervousness in her eyes she couldn't hide. The proceedings began, and her lawyer opened with a sob story. Hannah, the devoted wife, had been neglected, emotionally abandoned, and left with no choice but to seek comfort elsewhere. The narrative was carefully constructed, designed to paint me as the villain. But then it was my lawyer's turn. He started with the texts, the flirty messages, the suggestive comments, the plans she'd made with multiple men behind my back. He followed up with the video, letting the judge hear, in her own words, exactly how little she thought of me and our marriage. And then, the knockout punch, the police report from the bar. By the time we were done, Hannah's carefully crafted image had been torn to shreds. Her lawyer stammered, trying to counter, but the damage was done. When the judge finally delivered the ruling, it was swift and merciless. The divorce was granted in my favor. Hannah was denied alimony, ordered to vacate the house within 30 days, and penalized for her role in the altercation at the bar. It was over. After the hearing, I stepped outside, the cold winter air biting my skin. For the first time in months, I felt something like peace. Hannah's web of lies and manipulation had collapsed around her, and I was free. I didn't feel victorious. Not really. What she'd done had left scars that wouldn't heal overnight. But I felt lighter, like I could finally breathe again. Hannah approached me as I stood by my car. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Liam," she said softly, "can we talk? Please." I stared at her for a long moment, the memories of our life together flashing through my mind. The good times, the promises, the love I thought was real. But that person, the woman I'd loved, was gone. "There's nothing left to say, Hannah," I said, my voice steady. "You made your choices. Now you get to live with them." Her lip trembled, but I turned away, opening my car door. As I drove off, I didn't look back. In the weeks that followed, I started rebuilding. My new apartment was small, but it was mine. I reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with, threw myself into work, and slowly began rediscovering who I was outside of being Hannah's husband. One night, as I sat on my couch with a drink in hand, I thought back to everything that had happened. The betrayal, the lies, the humiliating moments. And then I thought about how far I'd come. I didn't just survive what she'd done to me. I came out stronger. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone going through what I did, it's this: never settle for someone who makes you question your worth. Never let their lies define you. Because when the storm clears, you'll realize you were always enough. They just never deserved you.